Good morning. Welcome to Bluebird Quilt Studio Live. We're bringing you a bed of roses today. And if you had a thorny quilting experience doing free motion stitching on your home machine, we hope that we can make that a little bit sweeter. And we're going to talk about quilting roses. So when you're quilting roses, here's a few examples of some roses. This was actually stitched on a domestic machine. So hopefully you can see those. That was stitched on a domestic machine. And this was stitched on a long arm. So this border has some roses in it. So you can make some beautiful stitching patterns with roses, but I'd like to share some tips on how to do some free motion stitching and have a sweeter experience as you're stitching, and we'll learn about stitching some roses. So here we go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move these. We'll enjoy those today. So if you have had some challenges as you're stitching free motion, we hope these tips will help you. So one of the first things that I would like to share with you about stitching free motion is if you are up above your quilt, your stitching experience is going to be much easier at your domestic machine or here at this Amara ST. So getting up above your quilt is easy if you have the ability to either regulate your table height. So here we can move the table up or down, which is really nice. Or if you don't have that ability at your domestic machine, you can get a bar stool that allows you to get up above your quilt. That's super helpful. So that is one of the best tips I can give you. By getting up above your quilt, you're going to be able to relax your shoulders and reduce some of the tension that's on your neck as you're quilting. The other thing that is helpful, the second tip I have for you, is to master your friction on the table. So if you're stitching on your domestic machine, making this surface that you are actually quilting on super smooth and flat is going to be helpful. This Amara ST table already has this beautiful slick surface built in, and it has an extension table that allows it to be a wide open flat surface so you can manage your quilt more easily. You want the majority of the weight of your quilt on the table. Having a larger throat space makes that a lot easier. However, I learned to stitch on a domestic machine and still learn to love machine quilting. It is easier with a larger throat space. The next thing that I would say, my third tip for you, is plan your stitch path. All right, so we're going to talk about stitching these roses. So Sarah, if you can make sure that this is in the camera here, we'll talk about stitching roses. So if you're stitching this type of flower, I find it easiest if I visualize or I'm thinking about spiraling in. So this is the path that I am talking about when I am thinking about stitching a rose. If you want a more whimsical rose, as you're stitching that path inwards, if you kind of bump along the spiral, that is super helpful, and you'll end up with a rose shape that's like this. Now, once you get to the center of your rose, you can either tie off and then go to the outside of your rose, tie off, and so you'll have a little thread jump there. and then you can go ahead and begin stitching again. That's one option. Or if you'd like, you can also go ahead and spin back out, add a couple of extra rows of petals, and then you're on the outside of your rose again. So if you were going to do that, your whimsical rose would look like this as you're stitching it. You would bounce in on a spiral, okay, and then spiral back out, bouncing your way back out again. And now you're on the outside and you can continue stitching. You could add a leaf or a swirl. So that's a more whimsical style of rose, but we're still thinking this spiral path. Now, if you want a more realistic looking rose, you might want to try your spiral, making it a little flatter and kind of wiggle the path as you go in. So here we go. I'm gonna try to do this like this. So here I go, little flatter, but I'm wiggling that path and trying to place this off center as I wiggle inwards. Okay, and once you get to the center, go ahead and tuck in real nice and tight. And again, you're still going to end up in the middle there, so you can work your way out, adding more rows of petals, or you can tie off and come out here to the outside and stitch your path. Stitch on the outside and make your leaves or swirls or whatever you would like. So let's actually do that on this machine here. I'm going to use some gloves here. There are other options, and you know, quilting is a smorgasbord of possibilities. I find the gloves super helpful. Some people like these larger paddles where they're moving their quilt this way, or you can also use these little sweet spots and move the quilt top that way. So many different ways to work here. I'm going to go ahead and just stand as I stitch. I'm a dangerous girl. I'm a barefoot quilter. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and do that very thing that we're talking about here. So this is my thought process. I'm swirling in like this. Okay, so that is what I'm thinking about. So to do that whimsical rose, I would bounce along that little thread path there, bouncing as I go. So here I go, bounce, bounce. So I'm visualizing the swirl in my mind, and I'm just bouncing on in to the center with my swirl. Okay, and if you'd like a smaller stitch length, that's also a good idea here. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up my machine. I'm going to actually do that again with a smaller stitch length. Okay, so there's a whimsical rose number one, but let's do that again. So fun to be quilting. I love it. Okay, so I would tie off, okay, and then I could go on over to the outside edge. Sorry, we're kind of jumping the gun here. Go over to the outside edge, tie off, and then I could start my next path. So let's try making this rose a little bit more realistic. So here we go. Gonna wiggle on in. And like so many things, it does require some practice, but doodling a little bit and just getting comfortable with adding a few extra rounds as you need them will make it much nicer for you. So again, if we wanted to go out to the outside, tie off. Let's add a few leaves. And you're off and running, and you're ready for your next pathway. So when you repeat that around the outside of a border there, you get a path that looks like this. So there's how to stitch some beautiful roses along the outside edge of your quilt. And the last tip that I have is, first of all, this sounds odd because I just told you you needed to practice, but I really encourage you to, at some point, make the decision, all right, this is good enough. I'm going to be okay to actually go to the quilt and begin stitching on a quilt. There's nothing quite like managing a quilt underneath the neck of a machine, and you need to learn that as well. And as you practice on a quilt, not only will you have the accomplishment of actually blessing somebody with this beautiful quilt of yours, but you will dedicate the time and practice that you actually need to master that particular design. So don't practice forever on a little practice bat. Actually go to the quilt. So as you begin to master these tips, you're going to find your perfect combination. We really invite you to come in and take a class with us about machine quilting, whether it's on your domestic machine or whether it's on this beautiful Amara ST. We know we can help you find your perfect path forward and hopefully make your quilting journey a whole lot sweeter. So we hope that those tips on making a beautiful rose quilt are helpful to you today. I'd like to also tell you a few things about things that are coming up here in the shop. So Sarah, we were talking about rose fabric. We have some beautiful rose fabric here. This particular fabric is from Wyndham Fabrics. Look at those gorgeous roses. Beautiful line of pinks and kind of charcoal grays. There's some really nice patterns that are downloadable that go with that line of fabric. Super wonderful there. And we also have our great little Bluebird batiks. They are flying out the door. Marilyn made this gorgeous sample using a chandelier pattern, a downloadable chandelier pattern from the internet. And this particular pattern uses 7 fat quarters plus some background fabrics, and she made a nice little scrappy border with some of those coordinates, added a few of the bluebirds in the middle, and then this Idaho Bluebird batik on the outside. So Marilyn did a great job putting that together, and we invite you in to see those beautiful Bluebird batiks. We're really having fun seeing possibilities with these and invite you in to share those. We hope you have a great week. Thanks so much for sharing a few minutes of your morning, and we hope that you find a bed of roses as you're quilting today. Come on into Bluebird Quilt Studio. We'd love to help you with your quilting skills and also some beautiful fabrics. Have a great week. Thanks so much for stopping in.